Hey guys, it's the Nerdy Movie Guy. Today I want to do something a little different. I'm going to be reviewing multiple movies at a time. So I want to sort of review, I'm going to say franchises at a time. There's just some franchises where there's more than two movies or even just a trilogy that I do want to review, but it feels redundant to review one movie at a time for several videos in a row. So for today, we're going to be reviewing the Purge franchise. So I got all 5 copies here on Blu-ray. So we're going to be doing a small deep dive into each of them. So we'll start with the first one. Now this one, Ethan Hawke does star in the first Purge. This is not the first Purge. This is the first Purge movie. It's not the one titled The First Purge. So anyway, we'll explain it later. This one was actually really interesting, and I would say the best one. Now, there is a lot of elements of the franchise that are more explored in more detail in the later movies, but this one I feel like just has a higher quality than the others. So if you haven't seen the Purge movies, essentially the plot is that across the nation, across the United States of America, all crime is illegal or is legal for one night only. It's one night a year. And of course, select government officials are immune from this. No one can call ambulance or police during this. It's just the nation fends for itself. Now, in the opening of this movie, before the Purge happens, we get to see a little bit of what the world would look like if this were real. So you have people, certain companies, for locks, for like iron gates, just security overall. Those are the companies that are really profiting from having a purge in the world of the Purge. Those are the companies that profit. And so in this movie, we get primarily Ethan Hawke's character and his family. It shows what happens with them. So we get sort of one family focused on in this movie. And the film is a home invasion style. So when the Purge happens, it's one house is essentially where the scenes take place the rest of the movie. Now, this is the only, as far as I've heard, the only complaint is people wish when the first one came out, they would have got a little bit more footage of what's going on in the neighborhood or the city or the nation. And this is a concept that the future films do explore. Now, some of them are interesting, some are not. So that's the style that is lacking later by having just one single handful of characters in their story. Because the further movies have, of course, a wider range of characters and plot. So, home style invasion in the first one, I think, works. It works as an entry to this franchise. It works as a concept. It makes it interesting, and it almost feels creepy. The way it's shot, the way it's filmed, just having these people they're just maniacs, essentially. Of course, in the world of purging, whether they're looting or killing or whatever they're doing, it's their American right. So you have political, radical people in this movie, in the world of Purge, that feel very empowered to do all this. They think they're doing themselves a favor, the nation a favor, their neighbors a favor, whoever they're killing, they're just acting out their right. And the concept in this movie is they get their rage out and all their emotions and all their negative thoughts and feelings, just get all of that out for one night and then they're good. So in this movie, the only upside to the Purge happening is there's not much crime at all the rest of the year because everyone's waiting for the Purge. So in the world of Purge, it's sort of the nation controls the crime mostly to one night. So for a movie, the concept's intriguing. This if it happened for real, this would just be scary. I don't think it would happen. But for a movie, it's an interesting concept. So we get one family is basically being terrorized, and some of them make it, some don't. And then we have this climactic ending where the timer nearly runs out. I believe, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's 12 hours. I think in the movie, it's like 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. It's something like that. So they have 12 hours to purge, whatever that looks like for them. So the movie sort of gets to this climactic ending where time is running out for the heroes to save their own people, and for the villains to do what they want. So it's definitely intense. It's creepy. There's jump scares a couple times for, horror fans of those elements. So this sort of has a little bit of everything in the first one. So that's our review for this one. Let's go to the next. The next one, The Purge Anarchy. This one was actually really interesting. We get Frank Grillo actually stars as essentially the main character for this one. And this one, like I was saying, takes place across the whole city. This one just takes place in one location. And this is sort of what I believe, as far as I'm aware, that people were wanting in a sequel. And for the most part, from people I hear who watch these movies, really like the second one. So we sort of get to see different characters, different perspectives being terrorized throughout the city. So the movie, in and of itself, being spread out through the city, there's a lot more action in the second one than the first one. There's a lot more action. There's a lot more battles. It's more violent. If those are the things you're looking for, this movie has more of it. So it is interesting because there's sort of not a closure to the Purge or anything of the political side of the Purge resolved in this movie. This is Frank Grillo's character gets involved, he's helping some people out, and they're trying to simply survive the night. That's really all it is for victims who get roped into purging or the Purge events that they didn't want to be a part of. So this movie is basically survival. So it is interesting. I do like it a lot. Frank Grillo is pretty badass. I think it's a great movie. I love the sort of designs of the boxes for these movies. But this one was good. I don't think it's as good as the first one just because the first one had more intense emotions and feelings that drug out of you, where this one did not. But this one, as an action movie, I would say, is really, really great. So, I know that's sort of a generic, quick review of the second, but that's how I feel. Because there wasn't a lot of in-depth concepts to this one. It was survival of the night, citywide. Now, the third, The Purge election year, it feels like, when I watched this movie, I was confused why they made two more. There was closure. So, the plot for the third one is, this of course takes place throughout the city again, but you also have this new character running for president wants to shut down the Purge. So you have the people in the political office are trying to have this lady killed so she can't stop the Purge. You have purgers trying to, get their last purge in if this is the last, and people are going after her. And Frank Grillo actually plays her security detail. So he makes his return in this one. He's part of her security, and he's essentially the main character yet again, which only serves the franchise pretty well, I think. So, this one was really, really good. I liked it because of the intensity and the build-up of this lady trying to become president and ending the Purge. It felt like there were stakes in this movie, for real. And it was interesting seeing the government sort of have, the high-tech technology side of purging and trying to kill her. You have purgers doing their own thing and trying to go after her. So you have multiple angles of who's purging and why they're purging that the first two kind of didn't. So I liked the third one a lot. And it was really good. And by the end of the movie, I won't spoil exactly what happens, but it does feel like there's closure for this one. The punchline is that essentially the Purge will be stopped. And so, we go into the fourth one. This was just unfortunate because I think they had a good cast for this, but the story felt extremely bland. So in this movie, it is called The First Purge, Nation Reborn. This is chronologically the first one. This is the first purge that happened, where it's sort of just this one city limit is where the purge takes place. It's not across the whole nation, and so it's a very condensed, controlled area. Of course, we know that this spreads to the nation, and they're testing on the city to see how it would go, what it would be like to have this legal for one night. But the characters are trying to survive the night, and that's really it. There's not a lot of underlying plots to this. There's not a lot of different angles. The government is testing it to hope that they'll kill people, to prove it's effective, so there can be more purges. So from a prequel standpoint of view, for fans of the Purge franchise, knowing what happens later, there was nothing intense about this movie. There were no stakes. There was, nothing new or surprising about it. It was just a new handful of characters, trying to survive the night. That's it. That's really it. So I found this one extremely boring. It's just too bad because I think they had a decent cast, but the story really didn't do the franchise or this movie any favors at all. So that's the fourth one. Now the fifth one, the most recent one, the Forever Purge. So it's interesting. This one it doesn't retcon, but it sort of goes back on what the third sort of did. By the end of the third, it's revealed there will be no more purges. So that's why the fourth movie was a prequel. This one takes place 8 years later, and, someone else in office, the Purge is back. So this movie starts off with the Purge 8 years later since the last one. Now, this movie sort of recaps this 8 years later Purge. The Purge night is a montage, essentially. It's recapped. It's the day after that's where the bulk of this movie primarily takes place. And we get to see sort of the psychotic side of purgers from this movie because they've been waiting so long. The killing doesn't stop when the purge is over. At 7 a.m., I believe it is. And so the purge keeps happening. But it doesn't just keep happening in Texas, which is where this movie takes place. It takes place all over the nation. Everyone's just purging nonstop. And essentially it creates civil war. The armies of America have to step in. Now the police are getting involved. Ambulances are getting involved. But everyone's being attacked. Everyone's being purged. It's just absolute chaos. So we have our handful of characters are trying to make it to, I believe, it's the border of Mexico. They're trying to get to Mexico. They're trying to get outside of the U.S. because the Purge is a U.S. thing in this world of the Purge. So the characters actually have a location to get to, so it's not just survive the night in one city. They're trying to get from one point to another. So that's sort of a side of this movie that the others just don't have. So that was something new. So it is interesting. And sort of showing the news, what's happening all over the nation, it's used as sort of a plot device to create dread across the world of Purge, not just in this one location. So I really did like this one. I like the first two, probably three, better. But this one, I don't think was a bad movie. I just think it was as good as the first three. So I liked it. Overall, I think the franchise is solid. The fourth is the only one I'm sort of iffy on. I know they're making a sixth. I haven't really heard much of what it's supposed to be about. There are rumors that Frank Grillo will be back, but those are only rumors, so I would take that with a grain of salt right now. Overall, I'm very intrigued by this franchise. Obviously, by the time I got around to watching them, the fifth has already been out for a while. And so I'm looking forward to the sixth. I think the concept for these movies is interesting as a franchise. It's violent and jump scare enough, I think, to count as horror, but just in the bare minimum. So it's enough for people to sort of dabble into the horror aspects of this. But overall, they're just intense, besides the first one, action movies. So I like it. I think the franchise is solid. Looking forward to seeing what they do next. I have them all on Blu-ray. If you're looking to get this franchise for yourself, these all, I believe all 5 of them are on 4K. I found them more affordable on Blu-ray, but there are multiple copies of this. I would not be surprised if they end up making a steelbook for them in the near future, especially closer to the 6th one's release, whenever that ends up being. Assuming it still happens, which I hope it does. So thank you guys for sticking with me for this franchise review of The Purge. I'll see you guys next time.